Awesome. All right, cool. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and hello to all the online people as well. I can't see your faces, but I think you get a good close shot of mine. So I'm going to be talking about a couple of business use cases for dynamic zone visibility, a sort of relatively new Tableau feature. So today we're going to be talking about what is dynamic zone visibility. We'll do sort of a quick dashboard demo that has a couple of different use cases for what I call DZV. We're going to see how it actually works in the back end of the dashboard to get those sort of different features to work. And we'll talk about a couple of things to remember when we're using some of these new features in Tableau as well. So what is dynamic visibility? Basically, it's the ability to show and hide all types of objects automatically in Tableau. Some of you guys may be familiar with the sheet swap. It's something that we've all had to use at one point or another, sometimes to switch out different measures or whatever. But this is better than the sheet swap because instead of just being like sheets that we can sort of swap out based off of like true or false Booleans or something like that, we're able to do all different objects. So this is text objects, web objects, buttons, and of course, all sheets as well can now be modified by dynamic zone visibility. This was introduced in Tableau 2022.3, which was not too long ago. So I think, unfortunately, like a lot of businesses don't have that version yet on their servers. So I haven't seen a lot of different companies using it. I feel very grateful because my company, they were worried they were having some like data issues. They had to do like a panic update. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. I get the new version. So I felt very grateful to start working with this feature within the last couple of months. And, as some of the stakeholders started to realize that we have these new features, a couple of use cases started to arise that they were asking for. And we're going to be taking a look at those today. So dynamic zone visibility basically is triggered by a Boolean. It has to be like a single value returned, and it needs to be independent of the visualization itself. Usually this means using an LOD, and I know I don't like to use LODs. Maybe you guys feel the same. It's not my sort of preferred calculation, but LODs are basically a core requirement, I think, for a lot of this different sort of dynamic zone visibility calculations that we'll be looking at today. So I have this little picture that I took from Mark Reed's blog. He works at the Information Lab as well, and he has an amazing blog on dynamic zone visibility. I highly recommend checking it out at some point. But you can see a couple of the examples of valid calculations that will work with dynamic zoning visibility. So that's counting, say, for example, this is like the Superstore data set, a count distinct of the number of regions. Then you can also see that parameters can be, a Boolean as well. So parameter equals a certain value. And then some of the sort of more interesting use cases that I haven't actually been able to use yet would be like, say, date name or is a member of. So you can sort of look at the groups that, different Tableau users are within and trigger the visibility of certain sheets or objects based off of their groups or their username, for example. So let's just get into the dashboard. Let's take a look at how some of these different things work and how they look. Okay, how do I hide this guy so I can open up my my thing? Oh, there we go. Yes. Okay, perfect. Cool. So currently I work with a real estate client, so I wanted to try to keep it like somewhat similar. So I took some property sales. This is from 2016 and 2017. A bunch of different like New York City property transactions. And, it's still just like in the real estate space. So I was like, all right, this will keep it, somewhat relevant to what I do in my day-to-day right now. So the first use case that we had here is we were finding at times we had this sort of like dynamic line chart. Oh, excuse me. I never get a call. No one ever calls me, and the one time they do is right now, 5 minutes into my presentation. That's fantastic. Okay. So the first use case is we had this like dynamic line chart where they would switch between different measures. I think they had about like 5 or 6 different measures. And there also was sort of like a date view as well. So they could look at the different months within the year, or they could switch that out and look at the different years within like a given month. They had a situation with a TTM or trailing 12-month measure where they only ever wanted to look at the given months within the years. So they wanted it to constantly be fixed to sort of a certain date view when they went to a certain measure. And that's sort of the first little use case right here. So you'll see for sales or transfers or number of units, we still have sort of the date view available to the users. They can switch between quarter and month. I just set up for this use case here. But if they went to this sort of trailing 3-month sales, for example, it will get fixed automatically to the monthly level. And then a little indicator pops up as well saying that TTM measures are automatically set to the monthly level. So that was sort of one of the first little use cases I think that I had built out for them as soon as, we got like the dynamic zone visibility upgrade. So the second thing that we've sort of been working on is drill down features. And that's what's probably one of the best things about this new feature is you're going to be able to sort of drill down into new sheets and new objects based off of the different options that you click. So if I come down here to the average sale price by borough, and I click on, say, Brooklyn, we are going to trigger a couple of new sheets to appear that, may be more valuable at a drill down level, but may have not been more valuable if they were exposed immediately to the viewer. It could have been too granular right out the gate for the user. So in this case, we click on Brooklyn. We now are seeing the leading building classes. And then we also have a sort of neighborhood breakdown. So these are the different neighborhoods within Brooklyn. This is right next to where I live, Bed-Stuy. And we can see that, we have a sort of handful of sales for different apartments within that neighborhood as well. So that was sort of the second use case that they came to me. They're like, we want to be able to, drill down a little bit better. And this is sort of something that I had created for them. Finally, if we click on, I'm going to hold control click here and click on another one. My third favorite use case has been the comparison drill downs as well. So now we're creating, a couple different new sheets here, but the primary things we're seeing here now is that the line charts have been split out into two different, Brooklyn and Bronx, the two different dimensions. We have a color legend that has appeared as well. The pie chart has been split into two as well, so we can immediately, and instead of clicking back between Brooklyn and Bronx and trying to remember what was the commercial or the residential breakdown of these different boroughs, we have them side by side for us. And same thing as well, we have the sale count and average sale price. I just made a couple of basic little jitter plots to show the comparisons between the two boroughs that I've chosen. And the cool thing about this is, I've only chosen two, but you could continue to sort of drill down further if you wanted to design it to where they could choose 3 or 4 different boroughs and have new sheets appear every time. That's all now sort of possible with the DZV sort of upgrades. So that's just the basic little demo here. And I'm now going to go back so we can look at how some of this stuff actually works here. All right. So the easiest of all the calculations was just sort of like a parameter Boolean. That was the first one you were seeing where the choose a measure equals 3, or in this case, it was the trailing 3 months, I think, measure that I had set. So this one's super easy. You're just setting a true Boolean choose a measure equals 3. It's testing if certain measure is being set by the parameter. And I made 2 calculations. One was choose a measure equals 3. And the other one was choose a measure does not equal 3. So that way my sort of TTM sheet that was fixed to the monthly level would appear. And then the other one would disappear when that sort of measure was set to TTM. So that's sort of the easiest way, I think, to get the DZV to work is like the parameter booleans. And this is sort of how this looks right here. So you'll see that we were setting this sheet here. This is sort of the little options that you now get for the DZV. You get to control visibility using the value. So I turn that on, and then I choose the sort of parameter Boolean calculation that I had created. DZV equals choose a measure equals TTM. The rest of them are a little bit more complex. I found that I tested so many different LODs sometimes to get some of these things to work. And Mark Reed had sort of talked about the same stuff in his blog as well, that it's weird because sometimes LODs just don't work. So I found that my preferred method for making any other DZV calc that doesn't rely on a parameter is using sets and LODs. So the one good thing about the sets are you can make multiple of those calculations with one set. And then from there, you're usually just nesting those sort of sets within an LOD, and it functions really well. So to show you what that looks like, what I did first was create a set and set action. In this case, everything was sort of being triggered off of the boroughs on that one chart. So the average sale price by borough was my primary chart. I was targeting the borough set, and you start with it being empty, and you sort of assign the values into the set as you click on them, and then you remove them once you click off of them, right? And this is what that looks like. So it looks a little weird, I think, because you have to, it seems like when you do like a double sort of LOD, that's when it works the best. But basically we're just saying here, right, if the borough set is not empty, then return the borough. We're taking a count distinct of that. So when I click on one thing, it should equal 1. And we're just taking the max of that because for some reason you have to put another LOD, nest the LOD in the LOD. So in this case, this first one here was just for the single value drill down. When I'm clicking on one borough, it's drilling down and sort of opening up those 2 or 3 neighborhood breakdown charts that you guys had seen earlier. And then this one down here, super easy, right? I took the same calculation, I change it to equal 2 instead. So I can trigger a whole new range of charts when I click on 2 values. And this is for my comparison drill downs right here. And from there, you can do other things that don't require dynamic zone visibility sort of to enhance your calculations. So in this case, in this chart where I sort of like split it out with the 2 lines, I basically created a calculation that said, if this double comparison is true, then return the borough, otherwise keep it empty. And that's not a DZV calc, but that's what led to sort of the lines being split out into the 2 different boroughs when I clicked on the 2 different boroughs. And as a little side note, I don't know if I had pointed out earlier, but like the color legend also relied on that comparison drill down calculation, right? Because we can trigger all different objects with dynamic zone visibility. So we're able to make the color legend appear when it's actually a value to the user. A few things to remember when using dynamic zone visibility. There's always going to be the question of how much do I hide initially and how much do I show initially. I purposely created a dashboard that was showing very little, just so that we could sort of dive into it and look at the different use cases. But something that I think I've learned within the last month or so, building out some of these enhancements for my company, is that less initially can be more digestible, especially when you have stakeholders that are slowly becoming accustomed to using data analytics, but they're not 100% there yet. So this can be sort of a good use case for those types of users where you want them to get comfortable exploring their content, but you don't want to overwhelm them out the gate. Another thing I want to note is if you have a bunch of hidden dynamic zone visibility sheets, your performance can still be reduced. That's something I've been having an issue with because some of my stuff is running very slowly on their servers right now. So they've been bothered by that. So just sort of keep that in mind, that performance issues can still happen. You have a bunch of hidden sheets that they're not seeing. And don't accidentally hide your dynamic zone visibility calcs. So my sort of workaround with this is I always create a sheet that I put notes on, and then I also drop calcs that will be hidden if they're not on any other sheet. So dynamic zone visibility calcs, when you set them on the sort of little click down, right, they will still hide if you hide all of your, different fields before you publish to server or something like that. So just remember to have them existing somewhere on the sheets, because if they get hidden, then they are going to break all of your dynamic zone visibility calcs. It's just something to remember. And yes, that's it. I think hopefully this presentation will be available because I have links that aren't super helpful if you don't have the presentation. But yeah, I've listed a couple of supplementary resources here, and thank you for listening. Do you guys have any questions? Yes, sir.
Just to go into the performance one that you talked about. So are all of the hidden sheets need to be rendered right when you open up the dashboard? And then it will look like it's not fully loaded, maybe if one of them is really slow, even if it's hidden?
Yeah, so that's a good question. What I've been trying to do to sort of improve the performance of like my hidden sheets is if you use sort of the set action method that I was describing earlier, your sheets will be empty until you've sort of, put something within that set, and then they'll get populated. So I found that can sometimes sort of help performance as compared to if the view was already populated and existing, and then you had to, just sort of expose it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah.
Of course. Any other questions? Cool.
Let's see if there's any in the Q&A.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, online people. Go Tristan, thank you. What version of Tableau offers DZV? 2022.3. Convince the bosses to get a server upgrade going, guys. Anonymous attendee. It's a really cool upgrade, I'll tell you that. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it. And I'm not going to touch anything because I think you know what to do with your laptop.
I do.
Yeah, we'll send an email out afterwards with a link to all of the presenters' materials. So even if I can tech and stuff, then you'll be able to do so.
Okay. Hi, everyone. As you can probably tell by my accent, I am from the UK. I'm just visiting over here, so thank you for letting me come over and speak at your TUG. So my name's Jenny. I'm a data school coach over in the UK, and I'm going to be talking about how you can use Tableau Prep to make your data complete. Let me just double check. Can you hear me at the back, or do I need to speak louder? I will do my best. Okay, so a little bit about me, first of all, before we get started. As Jack said, I've recently become a Tableau visionary, which is super exciting. I'm also a Tableau social ambassador. And the reason that I hold those, I don't know what to call them, names, titles, there you go, thank you. I am still very tired from traveling, is because I do a lot with Tableau Prep. So Tableau Prep is what I mainly use. I help to run the weekly challenge site Prep and Data, along with Carl and Tom. And that basically gives you the chance, a safe place to play with your data preparation skills and upskill yourself with data, because when you get your data at your normal day-to-day job, they don't come with instructions as to how to get it to clean. So that's kind of what we try and do to try and give that opportunity. And I also co-lead the Tableau Prep user group along with Jack. So I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. And finally, I do have a life outside of Tableau as well. And I am a proud cat mom to my cat, Kira. And this describes our relationship very well. She's the boss. She did appear on my shoulders the last time I was presenting, but unfortunately, I didn't bring her with me today. So that won't be happening. Cool. But let's get into Tableau Prep. So the use case that I'm bringing you today is from one of my colleagues. They were working at a client, and this was with some sports data. So it was with football, soccer player training data. So we had some gaps in that data, and he was wondering how we could fill in those gaps. So basically they wanted some way of measuring with the overall performance of an athlete is in these training sessions, but obviously every day they don't do every single training session. So there's going to be some gaps and some kind of variations that they weren't too happy with. So I'll show you what I mean in a minute. But yeah, it is also a prep and data challenge. If you're interested in it, if you're at home and you want to follow along, if you want to get your laptop out, no, don't worry, it's fine. I'll probably be going a bit quick. So let's go and look at the data first of all. So where is it gone? Got lots of tabs open now. Well, let me just flip to prep and data quickly, just to show you what it looks like. So every challenge looks like this. You get a nice explanation of the data that we're going to ask you to work with, what it looks like, some of those step-by-step requirements, and then you get what we're looking for as the final output. So much more easy to understand than potentially just opening up a messy data set and being like, where do I begin? So that's hopefully our goal here. And let's take a look at that data in Tableau Desktop. Let's start off where we're familiar. Well, that doesn't look right. Let's come out of presentation view, go back in. Perfect. So this is our before. So this is our data set. It's filtered to one of the players that we're looking at. And you can see on the first day that we have there, the top row, it's all filled in. We have a nice average at the end. We get some kind of idea as what's happening for that player, what their score is across those 3 different sessions. Agility, cardio, and strength building. Those are my guesses as to what athletes might train in. I actually don't have any idea, but I did forget to mention, yeah, obviously we mocked up the data for the prep and data challenges. We're not giving you insights into some soccer team in the UK. So when we get to the next line, the average kind of shoots up because they had 2 really great sessions, but they didn't do a 3rd session on that day. So maybe that's why they were performing a bit better. So now their average is 9 on the next day. So that's a spike. And then it goes to Wednesday. They only have 1 session, but they did really badly. Well, they did very averagely in it because they've just got a 5 there. So we can see that there's a lot of ups and downs going on if we were going to use this as our metric going forwards as a way to measure how the athlete's performing. So what we'd rather have, what the client wanted basically, was all those gaps to be filled in like this. So you can see that the gap that we had for strength building on the Tuesday, it's been taken from the one above. So just fill in those gaps, look at their most recent session and use that to make an average. And now it's starting to look a bit more consistent, that's the word I mean. Obviously, as it's fake data, don't look too far down and see that it gets less consistent towards the end. That's just, I didn't do a very good job of making fake data. But yeah, so that's what we're going for. And let's go into Tableau Prep and see how we can do it. How many people here in the room have used Tableau Prep before? It's a good number, probably about half, I would say. Awesome. So you're very familiar with this kind of screen. This is what you see when you open up Tableau Desktop. Looks Tableau Prep. It looks very similar to when you open up Tableau Desktop. So hopefully it has the same look and feel to be able to follow along with. So I'm just going to drag in the data that we're going to work with here, just like you can in Tableau Desktop. That's always my lazy go-to rather than finding it any other way. I'll just zoom in to make the steps a little bit bigger for you at the back. So we've dragged in the data, it's brought us in our input, our connection to the data. Wonderful. We can just click on this kind of grayed out step to create ourselves a clean step to be able to start looking at the data that we've brought in. So this is the exact same data set that was in the dashboard. But what we have basically is we have 4 columns. I'm just going to move this up so we can all see, just telling us about the players, the sessions, the dates. You can see it there kind of looking a bit different to the other fields at the moment. We've got a kind of histogram that's summarizing the view at the moment. I'm just going to click on the menu there and change this to be a detailed view instead so that we can see each individual date there. And then we've got their score there at the end. So some key indications that we have kind of missing data here. We'd want, for example, our players to all have the exact same number of rows. But we can see from the gray bars behind each player name, maybe not at the back, but at the front we can see that they're not uniform. They're not the same length, these bars. We're probably having some data missing in this case. Similarly with the date and the sessions, if this were truly complete, if we had data for every session, for every day, for every player, they'd all be nice and kind of uniform, those bars. So that's what we're looking to get to basically. Okay, so first thing I always do when I'm looking at a data set is I kind of want to work out what each row is. I've kind of already told you what it is, but if I click on a player, then I can see, for example, player 1, that'll filter down here below. I've got 290 rows for player 1. I can hold down control, click on a session type, so agility, and then I can start to see, definitely not at the back, I can start to see in my date here that there are certainly missing some of the blue shading behind these bars at the moment. They're kind of right over on the left of each of these dates. You can just see some blue shading where there is data. So we're missing, for example, the 5th of January. Sorry, I didn't change my region to be American. Forgive me. So this is the 5th of January and it's missing data for agility. But I can filter down to, say, the 3rd of January where there is a session. And now I can see I just have 1 row left. So that is my row level of detail that I'm working towards. And I want to get a row for every single session, for every single player, for every single date. That's what we're trying to do. Okay, zooming out there. So first thing you might think is that recently, semi-recently, Tableau introduced a step called new rows that helps us to fill in new rows in our data. So let's try that. Let's take a look at how that step works. So I can just add that new row step in. And my options that I have over here, I can either use values from 1 field or values from 2 fields. So it's kind of the dates that we're looking to update. So let's select our date field. Okay, it's working and it looks like we've got an increase in the number of rows, so that's good. If we just look at the configuration here, then we're seeing that we're updating our date field, just adding in those new rows, slotting those in. We're creating a new row for every day. That's good. And what we want to happen in those new rows, we actually want to copy them from a previous row because we're trying to see what was the most recent session that player did. So we can select that and see if that's done and behaved as we want it to. So we'll select our good old player 1 and their agility session. And we can't see that 5th of January that we knew was missing. So at the moment, it is just looking at the entire data set and just filling in any of the dates where maybe no player had training at the moment. So it's not quite doing what we want. And that's because we want basically there to be some way of grouping on the player and the session so that it creates a new date for each player for each session. And currently the tool doesn't allow you to do that. So how can we work around that instead? Well, there's this other option here, which is values range from 2 fields. So basically what we want is we want to know for each of the sessions that happens, when is the next one going to occur? If we had that information, we could then fill in between those 2 values instead. So that's what we need to try and get to. So I'm just going to delete this step and show you what we're trying to get to back in the PowerPoint. Ooh, there it is. And just see, so this is our data as it looks at the moment, just to remind you. And we just want to add on from these dates in the field, we would just want to shift those up. So each date from the following row goes to the row above. So we want it to shift to move there. So our top row, we want to know that the 4th of January is the next session for agility. And then when it gets down to the 4th, we need to know that the 6th is the next one so we can fill in the 5th in between those 2. So that's a bit complicated, isn't it? Because Prep doesn't have multi-row functionality at the moment. So how can we get those 2 dates next to each other? It's going to involve a little self-joining, joining onto itself. So let's go and do that. If I don't need to add another step, I've already got a clean step. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to, for each of those players and sessions, I'm going to number those sessions. So what's the order of those sessions, first of all? And I can use a rank function in order to do that. So on my date field, if I just go to the menu and create for us a rank, then we get this lovely visual editor that I very much like in Tableau Prep for creating ranks. I think it works really well. We're ordering our date. We want it to be, rather than descending, we want it to be ascending. So our first date is first. So we swap that around, and then we're just grouping by each player in each session. Boom, boom, boom. There we go. So this is where we are able to control what we're grouping by. And now we can see that those rankings are starting from 1 and they're now unique. So I'll just rename this field to be the order. And that's all done for us. Okay, so now I'm going to add another clean step. And I'm actually going to update my order in this clean step, because this is where we're going to, this is almost like our second data set that we're going to join our data set from the step before to. So what do I want my order to be? I want everything to shift up a row, basically, all those dates to shift up to the row above them. So I need to -1 from my order value so that I get that movement happening. So I can just create a calculated field and update this order. So it'll give me a warning to say that I've already got an order field, but it's quite nice to be able to overwrite fields, which you can't do with calculated fields in Tableau Desktop, of course. But now that just updates to the order. It now starts from a 0 there. I appreciate it wasn't very visual on the screen, but for example, player 1, agility, now we can see that the order starts from 0. There you go. Okay, and I'll just rename this date field to be the next date instead, so that I don't get confused which field is which when we do that joining. And I don't need duplication of the score, so I'm just going to get rid of that at this point as well. Okay, now for the slightly confusing bit of joining it back to itself. So I've got, if I just can move this down again, there we go. Nope. There we go. So this is how it then looks. A bit confusing, but I've got my clean 1 and my clean 2 joining together to make this new table. So it's picked up automatically that I want to join in the order, which is great. But then Prep's also clever and gives us some recommendations. It knows that the player and the session are also common fields. And because we're grouping on those fields, we need to include them here at this stage. Otherwise, look at our join result. We'd be getting like 200,000 rows. So we just add those in using the little plus there. And now that's looking a bit more reasonable, the number of rows we're getting. Okay, we can see some red happening here in our results of our join clause. So this is where if we click on to see what's being excluded, we can see that these are all dates that are later in the data set. They're all in July. So this means when we did our shifting around of the dates, obviously there wasn't a next session date for these particular rows. So these are the last sessions of our data. So in order to include these, we just need to make sure we're doing a left join to keep them all in. And you can see it now. We have all the rows coming through in our data. Oh, I did not mean to zoom. I thought it was already. Okay, so let's just add a clean step and take a look at how our data is looking now. So I can get rid of some unnecessary fields quickly. So the ones that were duplicated that we needed to make the join. And now when I look at my player 1 and agility, then I can see that I have, very nicely, I have the next date on the same row that I can start working with. So now I can feed this into my new rows step in order to get those dates filled in. So for the first row, of course, I don't need a date filled in, but for that second row, I need the 5th of January to come through. So let's quickly do that. Add in that new rows, change it to be value ranges from 2 fields. So our date is the first field, the next date is what we want to fill up to. We just need to change this to be copy from previous row again, so those player scores fill down. And we'll just rename this to be session date rather than new rows 1. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay. Now let's check for our player 1 agility again. It's the easiest way to go ahead and check and see if it's working. So that's definitely a lot more values that we can see have been generated. So for example, for our 4th to our 6th of January, we have these additional rows for the 5th and the 6th of January. So it is actually adding on one too many rows each time. It's creating new rows for the kind of boundary as well. And that's because here at the moment in the new rows step, we only have a clause of a less than or equal to, which if we could change it to less than, that would save us a lot of hassle. But as it stands at the moment, we'll just have to go and minus 1 day from our next session date, so we don't have this duplication occurring. I'm trying to decide whether I should do that quickly. No, I think you all know that, but go on, I will quickly do it, otherwise it's not complete. So I'll just go back into my previous step, update my calculation for the next session date, or what I think I called it next date, didn't I? And just minus 1 from there. So a quick date add calc to minus 1 day from that next session date. And then what we see is no results, because it doesn't like, because a date add will give us a date time. So we just go and change that back to a date. And now we'll be happy again. I do realize there was one more thing I forgot to do as well. If I'm looking at my next date, I've got some nulls at the top here. Those are those values where there wasn't a next session date. They were brought through by changing it from an inner join to a left join. So all I need to do very quickly is just do a fixed level of detail calculation. Looks a bit different in Tableau Prep to how it looks in desktop, but I can change this from min to max, so I get the maximum date in my entire data set. And then I can just update my field where there are null values to take this max date instead. So if I say done there, and then just drag this one on top of the next date. Now there we go. That will all be nice and complete, and we'll get all of those rows filled in. Okay, so that is the use case there completed, how we can fill in that data. Thank you very much for bearing with me as I forgot a couple of things. And if I piqued your interest in prep, if you haven't used it before, even if you have, then please come along and take part in the prep and data challenges. We start each year with beginner challenges if you're new. And then February, we also did an intermediate month. So again, building up your skills. And we're currently in our advanced month in March, which is a lot of fun. I think this would probably sit in the advanced level. So if I lost you, I'm sorry. And please do come along to the Prep Use group. The next one for the American time zones will be in June. We'd love to have you there too. It's all remote so that we can cross over different time zones and spread prep around the world. And if you're interested in some free training on prep, then please come to one of the sessions run by the Information Lab in the UK. They're all online as well, and they're every other Thursday at 10 a.m. Ooh, it might be different next week just because of the clocks.
Yeah,
it probably would be 11 a.m. wouldn't it? Oh, I just thought that. But normally when the clocks aren't unsynchronized, it's that. But just in case that's something that you're interested in. Otherwise, thank you very much. And any questions in the room? Nope. I'll just double check if there was anything online. Thank you, Elaine. Cool. Okay, sorry.
Do you know when actual multi-row functionality is coming in?
I don't know when actual multi-row functionality is coming in. It was something that they talked about at Tableau conference last year. It hasn't yet been released, but something cool that did get released just yesterday in 2023.1 is the ability to kind of put a source row number in your data set, which makes it a lot easier to do some of this kind of moving around multiple rows as we've done today. So
if you had a guess, how often do in like real life situations do people say, I just can't get there from here using the product with the current feature set, and we need to get someone to write some C formulas, you know, do something in Python or something?
I think that it does happen, definitely. But I think that sometimes people underestimate what prep can do. Like, for example, they'd find that initial bit where they get stuck with the new rows step, and then they wouldn't think of that there is a workaround that you can use to get it to work in the way that you want. I mean, granted, it would be nice if it were easier to just use it with some clicks of buttons instead of the complicated logic I've just said. But yeah, I do see that some you know, but it's like any tool, you could say that with Tableau, that, you know, the workarounds that you have to do with Tableau desktop, some people would walk away from. But yeah, does that answer your question? It was a ramble.
Unanswerable. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much. Then I will leave it on this.
Yes.
Stop sharing my screen for.
There you go.
Good evening.
Ooh.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I wanted
really broken up. I don't know how we fix this.
I fixed it earlier when I stopped sharing my screen. But I just stopped sharing my screen, so.
Does your David, can you speak again?
can you hear me now? Is the sound better?
No. Yeah, what do you normally do with the owl? Change it for what?
Get the audio come from TV.
Maybe.
Standing by.
Yeah, give us a second. Oh yeah, that's dumb.
Yeah, so yeah,
Try now.
Is that any better?
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay, fantastic.
And you can still hear us.
I can hear you guys just fine. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone, for letting me speak tonight. I really appreciate it. I want to give you a little bit of background about myself first. My name is David Brezler. I have my own company called Brezler LLC. I work in both project management and data analytics, and people that are familiar with both of those realms will see the circular nature of both of those things. One of the things that I work on specifically, and thanks Zifa for asking me to work on this for this evening's talk, is requirements gathering. You hear about this quite a bit because every time you approach putting together a dashboard, there's a number of requirements, and usually those requirements are based on things like color scheme, whether or not there's a logo on the dashboard, where that logo gets placed, if there's other sorts of branding that needs to be involved, also the organization of the dashboard, if there's a functionality that you need to include, and if there's any specific calculations that you have to involve. That's great. Those are all things that are really spearheading your design process. What I generally have are, when I approach a dashboard, are things that are my own internal requirements gathering. Am I going to be able to include something like movement on the dashboard? Am I going to be able to tell a story? Is the client actually asking me to tell the story for them? I have a favorite sports team from my youth, so I'm constantly trying to involve the Yankees colors as much as possible. So you'll see in just about every single one of my dashboards that there's a blue bar with a gray dot, or there's a gray bar with a blue dot. I'll see how many of you pick that up as we go along. And then the last thing I have in my notes, I'm trying to read my own handwriting. Is what you're designing going to make some sort of change? Is the dashboard that you're putting together just tossing out metrics because that's what the company asked you to do? Or the agency, I'd come from a long history of public agency work, so I have a lot more different types of experience than most of the folks in the room. Most of the folks in the room are come from the corporate realm. I come from public agency work. So all of my designs are really focused on that type of thing. But what you're designing, is it going to make some sort of change in the initiatives that you're working on in your department? Is it going to make some sort of change in the direction of the agency? Is it going to make some sort of change for the people that are being served by this initiative? So let me get started with a few of the dashboards that I brought with me today. Let me see if I can do this and not blow everything up. I want to show off one of the first visualizations that I ever did, which looks a little bit Tableau-ish, but is not actually from Tableau. This I did entirely in Excel, but the reason I brought this with me is to show those points that I just brought up. Are you going to make a change with the thing that you're presenting? This particular dashboard I put together and I handed to my deputy director during a program that I was working on, and they had been looking at spreadsheets for years. And they said, well, we know what the data says. And until I showed them this, right? This was a thing that once they saw the data visualized in hierarchies, donut charts, and bar graphs, all of a sudden it completely changed their attitude towards the initiative that's being presented in this specific dashboard. Now, there's a blaze of color across this dashboard. Probably it's not dramatic, it's not in line with the most up-to-date design standards, but once again, blue and gray in the top right corner, and that's the only thing I'm going to bring up about this specific thing. Let me bring up the next dashboard that I had brought with me. Let me make sure that, why is this not cooperating with me? Oh, now that's odd. All right, the next one that I want to bring up is this specific one. This is all about housing. I'm hoping that I can push the right button so that I can get into presentation mode. Good. This is my branding up in the top left corner, but this went to local government recently. And the reason that this was particularly important was you've got a median house price. This is data from some time ago. This is not current. And I pulled this off of Zillow. But the point of, and I'm sure that several people are accustomed to Zillow's data warehouses, which are pretty interesting to swim in. But the important point behind this dashboard was to give a demonstration of salary ranges in an age band and the distribution of housing prices, not necessarily the median house price, right? Because median only tells you where the middle is between the bottom and the top. It doesn't tell you how many houses are available in a specific price point and what housing could be accessed by people that are in these income ranges. And that was the question that the local government was asking, is how do we change the language around how people are looking at the housing problem? What's available? And what can we do to get more people into the housing market? Of course, this is from some time ago. Mortgage prices have changed, salaries have changed, a lot of economics are different. But in order to answer that question of how do we change the language around getting into the housing market, these questions are still valid. And I think that I did send the links to my Tableau public. So I'm sure that everybody will be able to access this after the presentation. Going to say change, and then let me get you to the next one. Oops, that didn't share. This is another very large topic that's going on right now. One of the bigger initiatives that I work on is renewable energy. and most specifically offshore wind. So a lot of people have probably heard this come up in the news, or the offshore wind projects killing whales in the ocean that's just off of New York, where they're planning on installing the turbines. I'm going to play this because this is only 10 seconds of video. Note where all of those lease areas are, right? The green and blue pockets, and then just watch where the dots show up. So that's 8 years of data in 10 seconds. And where all of those dots have shown up, there are no projects active right now. There's no steel going into the water. We're still waiting for all of the survey work to go on. So once again, are you answering questions that are being asked in the public space? Or are you changing initiatives? Are you doing something that that can make some sort of difference? And that was the point behind this particular visualization. You'll notice I've gotten smarter about putting my branding on the dashboards. But again, the point is, you've got this organization is specifically to present that map that's moving, right? And to illustrate the fact that there's no correlation between where the projects will be happening in the future, they're not happening right now, and the issue that's at hand. So this is, that's the last, let me get to this last dashboard that I really want to show off, which is this one. Here, okay. One of the things, I'm really glad that Jenny talked about sports right before me, because this is a very sports related dashboard. And one of the things that I'm gonna, let's see, let me get to presentation mode again. All right. So again, are you telling a story that needs to be told, or that hasn't yet been told, or are you answering questions that that maybe the people who are looking at the data haven't thought yet to ask, right? So I happen to be pretty involved with CrossFit training, and this is a dashboard from the wrap up of the 22 season. All of the data points from the 22 season were published, and anyone who's familiar with professional athletes knows that all of their data is out in the public. So you'll see there's a biometric section up here. Their home locations are here, but also which specific gym that they train in is here. So the question that everybody was asking at the point when I put this dashboard together was, is there an X factor related to any of the data in the field? You'll notice that the largest region sending athletes to the end of year competition is North America. So that's an open question. Why are those the highest number of athletes? But then again, if you've got athletes that list one region as their home region, and then they also train in different locations in different countries, and there's a lot of that data in this dashboard. You'll notice all of the numbers over here changed, and lots of other questions to be answered. How many points did they get in different competitions? Each color band represents a different competition. This was sort of a, when I first went at it, I had questions that I was trying to answer for myself, and then realized as I was going through it that those questions weren't the right ones anymore, and I had to point at different different questions. So a lot of things ended up in this dashboard, and it's fairly complex, but still movement, storytelling. You'll notice the blue and gray in this specific chart, and the gathering the requirements to handle this specific visualization came from months and months and months of listening to what the questions were in the field, listening to what people were talking about in terms of how can we define who are the types of athletes that make it past all of these phases to get to the last end of the year competition. And I think that that's where I'm going to wrap up my presentation on requirements gathering. I'll take questions now. Everybody talk at once. The sound seems to be off for me in the background. I can't.
So I'm interested, so you say you work more in the public sector versus the corporate sector.
Sure.
Can you explain more about that?
Yeah, so there seems to be a little bit of feedback. I started my work in project management with New York City Housing Authority, and did a major hurricane recovery program for them that took about 8 years. That program transitioned into another program at the same agency, and went from there to starting my own company, but still addressing, for example, this renewable energy, different topics in the public space, and all sorts of other things that are related to a lot of the work that I'm doing right now is directly related to offshore wind and renewable energy. So that has to do with government grants and public projects.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a question in the back. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, brilliant. So my question was, and you might have mentioned this earlier, so I apologize, but just to clarify, what are some of the big picture principles that you have to consider when you're interacting with your clients as far as gauging when there's too much that they're asking, right? Like, how do you manage with scope creep? How do you manage understanding and have that dance with them where you're trying to do what they ask of you, but some of those requests are just not feasible, you know, for a variety of reasons, maybe data structure or just the timeline.
That's a great question, right? And the best answer to that is, are you, what is it that you're trying to present, right? Because a lot of times people will ask you to do just sort of a spaghetti against the wall dashboard, right? And what can we find? What data is there? Is there something that somebody should know? Yeah, you're right. That happens quite a bit, and especially in the public space, because they're not as accustomed to sort of this elegance of presentation that's from the corporate space. I've seen a lot of horror show dashboards. When I first started with Tableau, if you track back in my portfolio of work, you'll see some horror show dashboards, because I came from that mentality. It was like, throw everything on the page, right? But that actually doesn't answer the questions for you, right? If you have so much stuff that's on the dashboard that you can't even comprehend it, then it's as valueless as if there was nothing on the page. So the important thing is to know what questions to ask. And I actually had, thank you for asking that question, because there was a couple of things that I forgot to mention. But, you know, what are the questions that you're trying to answer? Are you trying to answer, you know, that you personally are showing off a new skill? Are you trying to move into a new role, right? Are you trying to make a public service announcement? Are you trying to demonstrate your mastery of a specific topic? Those are things that you should answer for yourself when you're designing your dashboard. But in terms of your client, what is the central question that you're chasing? Because throwing 20 separate charts on one page isn't going to help you necessarily if it doesn't answer a central question. It's too confusing. And if that's something that they're asking you specifically to do, it means that they haven't themselves internalized and processed what answer that they need yet, right? And so maybe workshopping what that is the more important factor at that point, instead of jumping straight into the visualization, right? I after I did New York City Housing Authority, I did a lot of work with New York City emergency management on COVID metrics that were going to the mayor's office. So we had dashboards that had to be very, very specific and had to be very readable, because a New York City mayor in the middle of a pandemic does not have time to figure out, how am I supposed to read this? Right? That whoever, it doesn't matter which mayor, whatever mayor it is, right? That person does not have time to go through 16 different layers of dashboard to figure out, this is the dot I'm supposed to be looking at. That person, you have to hand them a page that says, this is the answer, right? And if that person that you, and so sometimes that person doesn't know what the question is that they're asking. You have to let them know, first of all, what was the question you were supposed to ask? And second of all, this is the answer to the question that you didn't know you were supposed to ask, right? I don't, and I will keep going until somebody stops me. So I hope that I answered your question. But please let me know. I think that my information is in the space. So please feel free to reach out to me later, and we can have a longer chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna stop. And I'm gonna break this. Okay.